Appreciate
Dude,
that. No, but this reminds me, Jim, I appreciate you at least acknowledge it. I swear to God, I had some good stuff to say, but it's like this historical factoid I read about where there was an author who was working on a book. Then tragically, the second half of it got lit up in a stove fire and got destroyed. The pages did. And so he was like so distraught, he just killed himself because he couldn't rewrite it. I wonder who that author was. That's kind of how I feel like right now. I can't do it. I'm so fucking depressed. This is so genuinely bullshit.
I thought
this is so fucked up.
You guys had me going. I thought I really was a schizoid and he was a figment of my fucking imagination. So that
good freaking God.
You know, we're just kind of hanging out, guys. And this reminds me of, so I was only sort of joking about getting cucked by Elon Musk with Starlink. I don't know what it was about where I was homesteading and Starlink, but the last time I tried streaming, it was just so fucking jacked up. And immediately when we come back to our group chat, which Victor, you should post a link in the chat for all the newcomers here.
Yes, let me get on that.
He get fucking flamed, and he's like, "You guys are really putting the competency crisis into perspective," said one of them.
Yes.
Best 9 minutes of my life. But we were talking about, you know, the effeminization of Japan and all that fun stuff. So now that we've been thoroughly derailed.
Totally. But it's a hangout stream. We're working out kinks, and we're fending off as many psyops as we can.
Yeah, that was a Mossad operation. I know that was you, Mossad man.
It was Mossad man. So much for being an honorary house Jew. There he is subverting us like always.
So to rehash, if the audience doesn't care too much, I mean, we do have a few more viewers now. We just sort of got talking about the demographic shift, and I don't know if there's anything you want to add before we kind of transition to a different topic here.
We try to give some Cliff's notes. It'll probably be a little less rambly. The point is, this article you have up, 3 out of 5 young men, which I understood to be ages 18 to 29, are single, just straight up, no girlfriend. But you don't get the same percentage from younger women in that demographic, in that little age demographic. That's a problem because I think we're suffering the same thing that Japan is, where we are a feminized population under occupation, where we are more tempted to silo up in our little pods where we stay terminally online and engage with technology. And we don't go out there and actually do anything that'll help our demography out. It's the same thing with Japan. All those men getting stuck in their pods and in their technological little environments because they don't want to go out there. They've made the risk assessment or the calculation that women just aren't worth the squeeze, that the juice is not worth the squeeze when it comes to them because of probably hoflation or the fact that you have the 10% of chads out there just cleaning up all the women, and the women aren't interested in anything below that 10%. So I can also say that since occupation, the American occupation of Japan, that the occupied government instituted all these reforms. You have to remember the U.S. government people doing this were FDR New Deal types, even though Douglas MacArthur himself was more of a right of center guy. The stuff they instituted had certain feminist reforms, giving the right to vote and all these other things to women, and that's what caused their demography and their fertility to sink like a brick in water. And it's only been downhill since then because obviously, as we found in the case of Germany, when the Allied occupied government took control of those defeated wartime opponents, they wanted to rebuild those societies so they'd never be a threat again. And part of doing that is to really, really masochistically feminize them, where you have so many Germans scared of their own history or scared to give any alternative count of how World War II went down, where they have to eternally pay for their sins, even though nobody was alive during that time, by letting in tons and tons of immigrants. In the case of Japan, you have a feminized, anime-filled, kawaii-filled population. I'm glad you have the Wikipedia page up, where everything has to be cute. Everything is about being cute, and it's not about being some kind of based platonic ideal of a Chad Japanese imperial warrior dying out there for honor. You get a lot more of a discrepancy when your cultural norm is about being cute rather than being some stereotypical masculine samurai or something. So the point is, when you're under or you're falling victim to occupation, you just have really effeminized men and masculinized women. And that is not how you make a society that reproduces. So that's the random shit I have to say.
So Southern Scaffolder says every single time. Don't even get Victor started. You're going to completely derail the stream, and
I would. Yeah,
you're really going to get us shut down. But
probably already did. I need to be more cautious than I am.
Well, the nice part about that's how I'll know I've really made it as a YouTuber and a streamer, right? Is when I actually do get shut down, because so far I'm small enough that I'm flying under the radar, and I'm flying a little too close to the sun with a lot of the stuff I say. I'm a little more willing to play it fast and loose on the streams, because like they're going to be 2 to 3 hours long, and like nobody but people who aren't going to care is going to watch it for the time being. But we truly appreciate you guys tuning in as well. But one of the things that sort of reminded me of too is, for those of you who haven't watched it, and even some of you probably are coming from, a referral from him, but I've engaged with that Lance's Legion guy, and for context, Victor has not seen that particular video just yet.
I have not. I'm a terrible friend.
Well, terrible and busy with life otherwise.
True.
But in any case, one of the things that Lance advocated for that sort of piqued my interest was he advocated for this like hypergamy, for he likes the idea that the Chad 10% of men are getting all the women because that's got this eugenic effect. And there may be something to that, but I think the converse, or the unforeseen and unintended consequence of that is like, okay, if you're not getting any poontang, to be crass, if you're not getting married, like what the hell is the point of doing anything, right? Like the whole point of your time on this earth is to, yes, the trite and meaningless statement to do good, avoid evil, but you're supposed to procreate. That's programmed internally in you. And my one issue with the idea that only Chads should procreate is, well, you're not going to get the buy-in of all the beta male worker bees, right? To use the 4chan lingo, who make society tick and make society run. And I think that I don't know that it would be causal, but it's certainly causing issues in terms of the competency crisis and the decline in things like the upkeep of infrastructure here in the United States. And I'm sure that phenomenon is going to happen more and more abroad as they get less and less European.
Two things I would say. Oh, I'm sorry. What?
No, go ahead.
Things I would say. I'm very tempted that Lance got some of that idea from Dr. Strangelove, or to those who've seen the end of the movie when pretty much everything is getting nuclearly wiped out, that the way to bring back the population is to go deep underground into mine shafts and then like equip each man with like 7 or 8 really hot women to bring back the population. Like that's an explicit solution that's mentioned in the movie. And maybe what Lance is bringing up is so simple on a conceptual level, he probably didn't get it from, but that's what it reminded me of. And then at the same time, oh shit, I forgot.
And I'm sure he's willing to come on sooner or later and chat with us about that particular subject. And we're not even meaning to be critical. And truthfully, I don't think you take it in that way, but it's one of those, like, right, wrong, and different. That is what's happening. Not necessarily like the eugenic Chads, but these hyper masculine types are the ones who are procreating for, right, wrong, and different.
Sure. Oh, okay. What I wanted to say, that the second part was about the competence crisis and the demographic consistency of the population that this crisis is coming from in the first place. Because an eternal talking point, especially from boomers, because they couldn't just come out and say that affirmative action is bigoted against white people. They make the argument that you get a mismatch problem when you match people who don't meet the skill requirement with these jobs at a certain skill level. Are you not going to have problems? Or are you going to tell me with a straight face that these skill metrics or requirements that are set out are simply meaningless? They're just an obstruction to keep brown people out of it. We have to know that putting people who by any normal or honest standard are not qualified for the job into these jobs is going to produce some sort of issue. And I think finally, after tearing through the inertia of our society, it's actually rearing its head in an ugly way. And we're really finally reaping the consequences of it.
Well, and that's one thing I wanted to talk about too. I don't know how much the whole Baltimore Bridge collapse thing is a result of
Sure.
the competency crisis. I mean, I think that's just an unfortunate case of power loss.
Right. It
And,
could just be a mistake.
well, power loss and the fact that that bridge was built a long time ago when container ships were a lot smaller. So it probably was designed for a certain amount of force, a certain level of impact, but it well exceeded it because, it's old. Not everything, we don't have to put our tinfoil hats on for everything. Not everything
Right.
is the Ukrainians or the CIA or Mossad. Speaking of Mossad, Jimmy John says, watch out, Mossad man could always be watching. He's a real person. We interact with him. Mossad man has been one of our most loyal supporters, one of our greatest.
It's Kristen Poster. I know he's a hero in my mind, keeping our server alive by actually responding to the stuff we put in there.
he commits to the bit to the point where like we've questioned among ourselves whether or not he actually is a member.
Yeah, I know he could just very, very devotedly playing a role or a character. But I also wanted to add on to my last statement the Jared Taylor-ism of you can have standards or you can have diversity, but you can't have both. Right. Choose. Like, this is a choice you have to make.
And Blaine Morgan has been there for us for a while too, along with like human SVD.
Is
again, thank you all for joining. And a good part of this stream was dedicated to working out the kinks, and I'm glad. So the last time we did this, when it was a complete failure, we actually did spend a considerable amount of time like putting sources and things to go over together, and
Lord,
it just didn't work.
Pain. So, the pain is real.
One of the things we wanted to transition to, we sort of got sidetracked here, is so a couple of my viewers have put me on to, and I wasn't familiar with it. Victor was not familiar with it. This Agenda 2025 thing, which as best I can tell is like the left-wing QAnon like type thing going on. So I thought it would be fun if we all learned together. We were all enlightened together. So buckle up. Put your tinfoil caps on, just like the thumbnail, and let's get ready to learn. Are you ready to learn, Victor? Are you excited?
I'm ready to learn. I am a Chad Anglo looking to explore every bit of curiosity I have. I'm going to show so much curiosity and interest in learning that I will single-handedly colonize every other country I put my eyes on. That's the power I got, and I'm going to use it.
By Henson Shaving.
I'm so ready to learn. So, I look at the Wikipedia page.
Are you pressing the button?
Probably. What button? Is there a video?
Yeah.
No, I didn't press it.
The watch.
Oh, okay. I see. The new fascist playbook. Here we go.
Yeah, the new fascist playbook. This is Agenda 2025. Doesn't that sound spooky? Agenda.
It does. Well, because in one of the servers, there's an Agenda 2030. I believe in the Glow Op server that I'm in, one of the tabs there in that Gilded is called Agenda 2030, which might be some World Economic Forum shit, but now one thing that's passed around is Agenda 2025, which, yeah, it does have an ominous and scary name because, that's far-right patches.
That's a lot closer.
It's coming up.
That's a lot scarier.
Yes. Only 9 months we're going to turn into the Handmaid's Tale. It'll be totally fun, don't you think? Let's see what this video has to say. You click it. I'm not going to click it, so you can't blame me on clicking play.
Jeez. By Henson Shaving.
Are you kidding me?
By Henson Shaving.
Did it. Okay.
It's almost that time again. Election season is bearing down on us, and we have some truly strong contenders this cycle. In the red corner, we've got Florida Man, the Penguin, this guy, literally the only black Republican in the Senate, and of course, the God Emperor himself, the man who's so confident that he won't even show up for debates, Donald Trump.
By the way, that confidence was very well placed because Trump is going to win the primary anyways.
So I know you pay a little more actual attention to like normie politics. I kind of stopped because I've been so jaded. Like everything to me just seems so fake and gay that why bother? Are any of these people actually polling like a measurable percentage? I know that Nikki Haley folded.
She finally did. I mean, yeah, it's an old video, so this is probably when these candidates were a little more relevant, but Tim Scott never really got any traction. On DeSantis, really, for about a few months before Nikki Haley became more prominent, was also dying rather significantly because he had this autistic charisma issue that people started to take notice of. And the fact he looked like he was obviously focus grouped. I like the stuff he does in Florida, but he was just not catching on in a meaningful way. And then Nikki Haley was astroturfed, had the absolute shit astroturfed out of her by Democrats who wanted to fuck with the primary, or Democrats who had Trump derangement syndrome voting in the primaries, like in Maine or something. And then all sort of the center left types, like people on the Free Press, like Barry Weiss and what the fuck is her quote unquote wife's name? I forget what. Nellie Bowles. Those sorts of people who don't like Orange Man because Orange Man make me scared, but want a more sensible Republican in there. So a ton of establishment, deep state swamp astroturfing happened for Nikki Haley, but nobody bought it because she's just a curiously unlikable person. So in my mind, to answer your question, those other people weren't really that much of a primary contender. And the fact that Trump didn't do anything and the fact they still lost counts for something.
Well, that's what I was just going to touch on is like, not only did he not do anything during his presidency, but when he was running too, he was like the furthest to the left of the Republican field in 2016 for certain.
This is true because, not to interrupt you, but like my family, when we were watching the primaries as it was going on, didn't like Trump because he was more of a business Democrat. We were going for Ted Cruz. I don't know if that was the same thing.
We were a Marco Rubio household.
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so Trump was not our first choice. I think Trump's probably moved a bit to the right since then, but he was not necessarily the conservative standout. He was the populist standout from the all the candidates on there. So that is a good thing to bring up, that initially wasn't even seen as that much of a conservative.
Blue corner, we've got blue corner.
Dude, I don't know why it's
dude. I have the power, I guess. Let's do it.
We've got Oprah's spiritual advisor, Hassan's uncle, the chairman of a gelato company, and the reigning champion, the man who may or may not remember how he got there, Joe Biden. Yes, it's really shaping up to be a once-in-a-lifetime election season, and as always, a life-and-death struggle for democracy and the very soul of the nation, as they all seem to be these days, despite very few differences in Republican and Democratic governance. But there is one thing that actually does make...
Okay, this is how you know it's a well-produced video, because you got the nice, clean camera, the guy showing his face. This is a real product right here.
He's on the casting couch. He's got his perm in.
Yeah, and he's got all these artifacts there behind him. What is this channel called? Oh, I know this guy. Never mind.
Yeah, I know it too. That's how I was sort of acquainted with it. Is I made like 90% of a video on one of theirs and then just scrapped it because I didn't like it.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, I don't like to pick on people so much, but the physiognomy is real, right? Like,
no, it does. It matters. No, it matters. I remember.
Is this a person you want to take like political advice from? Is this a person whose philosophy you want to adhere to?
Well, if you were neurotypical, probably. But as we know, the left has a severe mental illness problem. And also, the left also has, like, apart from mental illness, part of their brain that probably isn't even functional. Because when it comes to the dirty word of profiling or heuristics or making inferences based on seeing physical characteristics like physiognomy, that's seen as crass, it's anti-individual, you're generalizing, you're stereotyping, you're being an evil Nazi piece of shit. So when you turn your brain off to that kind of possibility, suddenly you make the risk of assuming the best when you shouldn't, when it comes to people and their physiognomy. Like, we can tell, we have the heuristic of just looking at certain people going, this guy's probably full of shit, just based on how he sounds and how he looks, that the political worldview he advocates will not be good for furthering a civilization. That's a quick and dirty calculation. But if you forbid yourself making that calculation and you get bogged down in a sort of midwit fashion of, I think he's making good points, even though he's probably sophistically spitting out a bunch of shit, that leads you into all sorts of problems. You're denying a flow of information in a damaging fashion by not paying attention to physiognomy. But
well, and as high-minded as that whole line of reasoning is, I'm just sitting here listening to you and staring at the fact that this friggin' animal is not wearing a white t-shirt underneath his sweater.
Is that
you gonna trust him?
Yeah.
Like, I would know that so freaking quick. Does he just not have enough testosterone to like generate Manly amounts of
I
don't know.
This is ad hom. Don't you know that's a fallacy, James? James C. Dewey, Combative Narratives, that's a fallacy. Don't you know? But honestly, I have a feeling he could be doing it in this white, ironic sort of way, where it's like, people in the comments will notice I'm not wearing a shirt under here. It's very quirky. But Jesus Christ, we're only a minute in, and let's actually play the video.
Actually does make this election cycle a bit different. Conservatives have been lurching towards fascism for years, with the Democrats...
Oh, for years, lurching towards straight-up fascism. See, this really... this is funny that such a tendentious perspective is given, because we have boomer relatives, don't we? Like, you have parents who are in the similar vein. Pretty much just unironically calling the Democrat Party communists, which is funny, because if you were to ask a communist, they would hate the Democrat Party with a burning, searing passion. Like, I bet this guy kind of does, because he made a criticism of Joe Biden, which probably means he's far enough to the left such that he hates Joe Biden for being too right-wing.
I think he's smart too, because he knows that he's never going to get people like you and I. He's going for the normie tier people who are somehow on the fence, right? Which I've never been able to understand. Like, how can you be on the fence? I don't understand independent voters. Never have. If you're one, well, maybe you should read a book and form an actual opinion. But like, he knows, because it was a little funny, right? Like, I smiled a little bit at him talking about Joe Biden or whatever, and that's sort of the thin end of the intellectual wedge. If he can get you to smile just a little bit, poking fun at his own side, like it helps in his messaging.
He would argue that's not even his side. He would say that Biden is still a racist incarcerator of black and brown people bought out by corporations. He's a liberal, not a leftist, or he's a neoliberal. It's probably what he would say, which would be dishonest, because by social policy alone, we know that Biden is left of center, especially nowadays. I think that points to his own extremism. I think someone who would be understood to be left of center in his mind is probably right wing, or not quite fascist, but certainly contemptible, progressive neoliberal is probably the perspective he would take. And so you have this guy so far to the left, he thinks Joe Biden is basically a right winger, calling us fascists, calling mainstream Republicans fascist.
I, for one, want to give him the opportunity to substantiate that claim. I want to know what about us is so, or I guess us.
Oh, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, we got 16 minutes. Let's see. What's he got?
It's not far behind, though historically they've been a little more subtle about it. But recently, the American right has dropped a hot new single, Project 2025. If you thought they were bad before, just wait till you get a load of this. In today's episode, we're taking a look at the new conservative plan to seize total control and what it means for the future of the country.
To be fair, he did say, we broke it up with a pause a bit, but I think he did say the Democrats are not lurching far behind the Republicans. So he is taking that far left, independent, anti-Democrat party perspective, from what I can tell. Just to be fair to the guy and to protect ourselves against counter refutations.
I'm liking what I'm hearing so far. This Republican Party I'm hearing of sounds based.
Yes. And so, okay, this, not to piss off any listeners even further by not even watching the video, this is what's really interesting, because I had a professor in one of my college classes raise a stink about, was it CPAC 2022? The stage was shaped like a Nordic stave, or like a Nordic ruin that's associated with Nazism. Supposedly the CPAC stage was formatted in that way. And then he made the statement that the right needs to keep their extremists in check. That was basically the thing he said. And I remember thinking about that pretty hard, because he himself, just like seemingly every professor out there, was fairly far to the left, wondering to what end or to what benefit should the right wing, which you can tell such people already hate the right wing very vitriolically, what benefit does it serve us to keep our extremists in check? Like what? To make it more palatable to fuckers like you? Is that what we should be doing?
Well, yeah, precisely. I mean, that's the end goal, is just shut up and accept it. Shut up and accept it. Control your extremists.
Right, yes. Control anyone who can meaningfully oppose what I'm trying to do.
So in chat, Lion Dynamite, Lion, mind you, we're not even like a minute into this video. He's like, can we just drop this guy in Haiti already? Like, maybe at the end of 16 minutes, we'll get there. We'll get there. But let's give him a chance to talk. Let's give him a chance to talk.
Yeah, give him his light of day, and let's actually watch the video. Okay.
Brace yourself. Okay, Project 2025. What is it? Spearheaded by the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025 is a massive 920-page conservative manifesto detailing how they intend to give the president vastly more power, destroy bureaucracy, root out woke propaganda, appoint vetted far-right freedom fighters at every level of government, and have it all ready to implement the day the next conservative president is elected. Which they assume will be 2025, hence the name. Despite Trump obviously being the favorite, the plan is not dependent on any particular candidate winning, but can be implemented with any figurehead at the reins, who will become essentially completely unaccountable. God Emperor was supposed to be a joke, but here we are. You may have seen this book floating around online, The Mandate for Leadership. This is what most people assume Project 2025 to be, but this is actually just one part of a much larger conservative master plan. Project 2025 has 4 core pillars. First, the policy, as outlined in the 920-page document. This is where all the heinous and frankly disturbing policy proposals live.
Heinous and disturbing. Oh, God.
Heinous and disturbing. Can I get a
Just in case
disturbing in chat, please?
Heinous and disturbing. Dear God, I know. So good thing he tells us that. Yeah.
So what this sounds like to me so far is what and mind you, like, again, for those of you who are just tuning in, I don't know a ton about Project 2025. I work a ton. I hang out on Twitter when I do have free time. Like, I don't pay attention to this sort of stuff because I can't. This sounds like, to me, something that any rational opposition party, as they're taking power, would do. Like, that's what you do, is clean house. That's what you do, is root out all the things that they've put in place. Like, and there's been so much going on in terms of just like rule interpretation changes and legislation by executive fiat in the last couple of decades that you almost have to. You probably ought to have in your back pocket a 900-page manifesto detailing and outlining what you're going to do, because it's one of those things. It's just like, you know, in my recent video series, what's been intriguing me is, okay, it's all well and good to do what we're doing right now, dunk and dab on the libs, right? Show how idiotic they are. But like, you need to aim your sights a little higher, look a little further into the future, and consider what it is you're actually going to do. You know, and a lot of the criticism that, and it'll go back and forth on both sides of the aisle, whenever a bill is submitted, it's always like, middle of the night and the bill is 2,000 pages long and they're going to vote on it in 2 hours. It's like, right. How could any one person read it? While they're putting it out, like, you know, this video's 4-ish months old. So I don't know when they dropped Agenda 2025, but presumably it's been at least a year. They're showing you and telling, they're showing and telling the average voter exactly what they're going to do. How is that not like responsible?
That's oddly transparent now that I think about it. Right. So a few things I do want to say. It's hard to know where to begin, but when he lords over about how heinous this is and about how authoritarian this is, if he was honest, he would give a bit of context to some of the things the Democrats have done in response. Now, not to get too boiled down in partisan minutia, but he used the phrase expanding the powers of the executive branch. It's like, oh my God, how anti-democratic this is, so reprehensible. You have to keep in mind how seriously people took the idea of packing the court, as in just expand. Oh, they used the euphemism, the shitlibs did, expand the court, which means change the composition so it has more shitlib judges in there so we can get everything we want, because this evil SCOTUS has gone rogue and it doesn't serve our interests anymore. So we're just going to change the number and irreversibly start an arms race of increasing the number of justices whenever some other candidate gets in. Like, it'd be a totally destructive thing to do, yet they're totally for that idea because the SCOTUS has gotten so evil. And then you compound on top of that, back in April and May 2022, people should remember this. The Disinformation Governance Board, that cringy Nina Jankowicz person that was supposed to be in charge of it, that crazy theater girl who was singing TikToks in a very delirious way, that like quite unambiguously a sort of ministry of truth that thankfully they did put on pause because they reaped a shitstorm for it. Like, first of all, the anti-democratic court packing that they seriously proposed doing, put together with the ministry of truth they tried to start, Yet that just doesn't register in any of these people's minds. Right?
And I don't want to go too far into the weeds on, SCOTUS and the judiciary, but that's one of the things that's stuck in my craw as I'm considering, like, how do we fix the next government and, prevent this sort of thing from happening is like, okay, they want to whinge and moan over the fact that you've got some, really tepid conservatives on the bench right now who are not giving the left every single thing they've ever wanted ever. Like, back in my day, John Roberts was supposed to be the conservative on the bench, and like he gave us Obamacare. He would flip-flop.
Right. And Anthony Kennedy, who was appointed by Reagan, by the way, was like the epitome of the swing vote.
God, I hate Reagan. That's a stream for another time. That's a stream for another time. But it's one of those things where that's how the left has been able to do anything in this country against the will of the people, I might add, is we live in a critarchy, right? We are ruled by judges. Every single...
We are.
Like, you can talk about, acts of legislation like the 1965 Immigration Act, but that was only able to do what it did because of the deliberate misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment. Like, they straight up ignored original intent. They straight up ignored the Senate debates on the subject. And they went into, like, they didn't even base their ruling, which allowed for birthright citizenship in U.S. v. Wong Kim Ark.
Yes, right.
They didn't base it in anything in U.S. law. They based it on the notion of English common law. Like, this is how the country got screwed up. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why the founding fathers, as much as I do have a healthy reverence for them, as every American should, why on earth they didn't put more structure around the judiciary. Like, they intentionally left the door open for the courts to be packed. Like, why even bother having a judiciary if we can just stuff as many people on the bench as we want? Then it's just a legislature at that point.
No, for sure. What I would counter with is, I believe it was Justice John Marshall who, in the early 1800s, came up with the idea of judicial review. Now, this is a very uninformed, insufficiently, inadequately informed historical take. I think it was that justice's perspective that gave the judges so much goddamn power to begin with. I'm not sure it was the framers that intended SCOTUS to have that much power that could be investigated further. I think judicial review, that's where the concept comes from Justice John Marshall, might be a place to start if we were to look into that further. Not to, but not to be pedantic. But I'm very glad you brought up that when, as you mentioned, birthright citizenship and a horde of other terrible bullshit that the court has trafficked in, especially in the second half of the 20th century, these shitlibs never had any issue with that. They never had, SCOTUS has gone rogue. SCOTUS doesn't represent the will of the people anymore. It's filled with ideologues. Only when it's right-wing evil people they don't like started supposedly doing this that they started retching and having a fit.
And what pisses me off, like actually infuriates me, is this notion that the judiciary is supposed to reflect the will of the people. Like, no, motherfucker, the judiciary is supposed to interpret law. Right, wrong, and different. The law is what it is. They're supposed to interpret it as it is. The will of the people. Vox populi, vox humbug, to quote William Tecumseh Sherman, who incidentally hated journalists as well. He said that he would hang every journalist he could find, except he was worried that he would be getting reports out of hell before breakfast.
Or as Richard Nixon, I think that famous quote he had, "The media is the enemy of the people. Media is the enemy of the people. Write it down 100 times and remember." I want to get the precise quote, actually, so we can do our audience the service.
Well, in the meanwhile, let's keep playing.
Yeah, let's watch the video. Yeah.
Seems like you have to wield the magic playbook.
And don't worry, we'll look at some of those in a bit.
I'm that awesome.
2, the personnel database, which has been described as the conservative LinkedIn, as if LinkedIn wasn't cringe enough already. This will be a repository for conservative resumes from people across all sectors and from all walks of life, to be selected as needed to staff positions in every level of government, at both the federal and state level. 3, training. They've got a new online institute, basically PragerU, but for people who like to wear poorly tailored suits and fantasize about rolling back environmental regulations. This training program will create willing and able soldiers to serve on the front lines in the war on the woke cabal of the deep state. And finally, 4, the 180-day playbook.
Just want to add very quickly, he says it in a mocking fashion, but it's actually kind of astonishing. how much the deep state, and we can aptly describe that oddly as the intelligence community, all the alphabet agencies like FBI, CIA, NSA, and a shitload of other ones, they are getting very unambiguously woke now. People would make the argument, oh, they're using wokeness as a shield and as a way to hide empire and to conceal their evil white supremacist imperialism. But they are definitely appropriating woke LGBT rainbow skill shit. Like they have become just as woke as any other godforsaken institution in this country. Well, so ironically, calling it a woke cabal is not really far off.
Well, I think the biggest and best example of that particular phenomenon is the ATF, where the ATF has repeatedly reversed themselves on interpretations of law that are tantamount to creating law, right? The big thing everybody knows about is the whole pistol brace thing. And I'm not sure, Victor, how into guns you are or how familiar you are with it, but essentially as a result of Ronald Reagan's assault weapon ban, or at least, he tacked on to it, but you cannot have a short-barreled rifle or a rifle that has a barrel under 16 inches. And part of the definition involved is it has a stock and that sort of thing. But they, for the longest time, were getting around the stock rule by putting what they called pistol braces on there. Now, they were ostensibly meant to be like wrapped around your arm, but it was a stock. It was a stock. But the ATF issued letters saying that they were okay and copacetic. And a lot of police departments and sheriff's departments were like, yeah, this is fine. We're not worried about short-barreled rifles. We're worried about, Wakandans on the streets of Chicago hiding handguns. Like, that's what we're concerned about. But in any case, the ATF decided to, again, mind you, none of this has been legislated at all. This has not gone in front of Congress. They're not making the rules here. Congress isn't. So they reverse themselves on the subject. They say, you know what? We've been allowing you to have them for probably like a decade. It was probably like 10 years, something on that order. But you know what? Turn them in or you're getting a felony, boys. You're going to do a dime in a federal penitentiary. And there was a lot of back and forth around it. I believe it went to the courts, and then they ended up reversing themselves again. Now, who's to say, so you can have a pistol brace now, but who's to say that they're not going to further reverse themselves? And that's a long-winded way of saying, like, these people are not enforcing law. The shitlib, this leftist cabal, which does exist, is not even like interpreting law. They are just making up law. They are, through federal regulation, they're just creating law out of thin air. Mm-hmm. And chat, I know you can hear the gilded notifications in the background. I can hear them too, but I don't want to touch anything because then you'll be in for another like 2 hours of Jim's schizo rants where I just talk to myself. So as fun as that would be, I'm just going to leave it.
It ain't broke, don't fix it. All right, let's start this bastard up.
A step guide for the new conservative emperor to systematically implement the policies listed in the manifesto. Think IKEA assembly instructions, but for fascism. These,
it's just full stop, just straight up fascism.
4 pillars are the key components of the project, and taken together, they offer a pretty comprehensive vision for the dystopian future the right hopes to usher in.
Just pour on the rhetoric thick, buddy. Pour it on thick.
And here's the thing. If you actually listen to any conservative, like the best idea they can put forward is merely like a regression to the 50s, a regression to the 80s, or even like now with a lot of millennials and younger millennials, older Zoomers, they want to just go back to the 90s because they've got this impression that the 90s were based. Like no, right. Nobody is wanting to usher in a dystopian future unless you think that the past was somehow dystopian.
Probably do. It's worth keeping in mind that this is slightly obtuse of me or obscure of me. There's a book I read called Republican Gomorrah from 2009. It's written by Max Blumenthal, which is basically just a massive indictment of the Christian right in U.S. contemporary politics, and especially in the 20th century. One interesting thing you learn, because I was reading that book thinking, okay, bring on the accusations of theocracy, bring on the evil based quotes from white nationalists and other evil people of that nature. A lot of that book, and I'm sure a lot of the associated literature, apart from some handpicked quotes here and there, is regulation of abortion, right? The idea that you shouldn't be able to mutilate your child in the womb, and opposition to same-sex marriage, to gay marriage, right? The idea that marriage actually has a definition that shouldn't be changed at the whims of duplicitous and degenerate actors. Those are the two big ones, gay marriage and abortion. So to these people, the idea that you would oppose those things just makes you de facto a theocratic fascist. You're just an awful person if you oppose those things. That's their criteria for being a theocrat. This is the thin standard that they're working off of.
Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous on its face, because that's been the norm for all of human history. And it's like a wonder to me that these people, or perhaps they do consider it, right? But it seems like these people don't consider, like, who might be wrong? All of human history, or us these last 25 years or these last 100 years, depending on how you define it. It's wild to me.
Yes. Well, I mean, I would blame also in part people on the right, the more classical liberal sorts of people, where they also believe a form of that. They think that before the 1960s, everybody, for some inexplicable reason we can't describe, they were just racist, or they were just told to be racist by evil institutions. And then we figured out in the 60s that being racist doesn't make any sense. And now that we've moved on into this better world, like the people on the libertarian or the classically liberal right also believe a form of that. There is just this neurosis out there. For some inexplicable, misguided reason, all of our ancestors were wrong. It's like they all had this mental illness, and then Martin Luther King Jr. gave his quote, and then we all changed our minds.
All right, let's listen to this D-bag continue to talk. I'm going to let
it's all pretty alarming.
All right, no problem.
But where exactly does this come from? Let's take a look at some of the names behind the project. If you flip through the first pages of the PDF, because let's be honest, we're not about to give the Heritage Foundation $35, you'll find a list of far-right think tanks, advisory groups, and business and government figures who contributed to the project. Some of the names include Donald Devine, once called by the Washington Post Reagan's terrible swift sword of the civil service, for his eagerness to slash spending and fire people. Stephen Moore, the well-known conservative author and right-wing economist, with such credentials as working for the very legitimate FreedomWorks and serving as a Fox News contributor. And Peter Navarro, who is notable for being one of just 3 people who worked with Trump for the duration of his term without being fired. He's also a little bit obsessed with China, having written 3 truly awful books on the subject: The Coming China Wars, Death by China, and Crouching Tiger.
All right, now that's just dumb. Sure, you can make fun of an author for obsessing too much, especially if it's not necessarily their historical expertise. Focus a lot on China, but holy mother of Christ, you have to imagine a lot of the writers out there who are pathologically obsessed with Putin and Russia. People like, what's that chess player? Garry Kasparov is like, yes, genuine Putin derangement syndrome, or this orgy of literature, this cottage mill, I'm sorry, of literature about how awful Russia is and how terrible Putin is, or just look at this constant churning of articles from the mainstream media and authors about how Russia is the worst thing ever. To me, that is an unfair thing to uniquely pick on this guy's part. I don't know if you disagree with me on that.
You know, both of those thoughts had occurred to me as well, but I'm sitting here and I'm assuming he's done with naming the names because he said the word and it seemed that he finished his sentence.
Right.
But you know this guy, you know what his bias is, you know he doesn't like Prospect 2025, you know that his interpretation of any of this is not going to be particularly charitable, and these are the worst people he can dredge up. Like what their crimes are: working for Ronald Reagan, who did more against the conservative right and more damage to this country than, you know, probably Jimmy Carter did, for certain. You got somebody whose cardinal sin is they were a Fox News contributor.
How terrible.
And a guy who likes to write books about China, which, like, in his defense, they are the rising power. You know, we are living in a multipolar world now.
True. Oh yeah.
In terms
of America's falling.
In terms of geopolitics, if that's your thing, that might
seems relevant to me.
Books about, you know.
Yeah, it does seem relevant, and I would also say this dude, the guy in this video, undoubtedly postures himself as being somewhat above the fray because he doesn't get as stuck in partisan pitch fights between Democrats and Republicans. But one giveaway that always blows my mind every time is how much credulity they give to sources like the Washington Post when they say he's the sword man of the Reagan administration or something. It's like
Terrible.
See, this is what right. This is what makes me call people like him technically a rad lib. Right. If you don't know what a rad lib, think Vosh. Right. Vosh does all this posturing about being an anarchist or a socialist or a communist or an anarcho-syndicalist or whatever the actual fuck he claims to believe in. But at the end of the day, he will vote for Joe Biden or the Democrat Party down the line. He still assigns trust to these supposedly compromised corporate news sources that aren't actually left. Yet they will cite them with all the credibility in the world as if they're actual news sources. No, they still assign some level of trust to them.
Did you coin that term rad lib, or did you pull that from somewhere?
No, that's from somewhere. That's not a term I came up with. No. I had to figure out what it meant as well.
You make up all these great terms. I guess I just live under a rock, and I'm not.
You're in northern Alaska.
Yeah, I live.
You're not as
sea, so
you do. It's the internet connection's not very good out there. The broadband is disappointing. Yeah, I can't take credit for that term. So that's what annoys me about this guy is that they still get news from these total blue-pilled MSM sources and think they're credible, or at least when it suits them conveniently. But that's enough of that.
The manifesto credits 35 total authors, as well as dozens of contributors, all with their credentials listed. It's about what you'd expect. A lot of people from the Heritage Foundation, some military goons, a smattering of former Trump officials, extremist economists, and a considerable number of people who have worked in climate, energy, immigration, and legal positions under conservative governments. What you won't see a lot of in the acknowledgments is religious credentials, which you'd think would be important given how much the document leans on Christian language. This should be your first indication that maybe the people who loudly proclaim their faith aren't really all that Christian, and they're just using it to win brownie points among their religious conservative audience. There's actually a lot of overlap here with the topic of our last video on Christian nationalism.
How do you
These people use religion?
Okay, is it paused? Is it actually paused?
I believe it is.
The Mossad is fucking with my computer mouse. I swear to God, Mossad man is.
I believe it
after this, but
yes.
So. First of all, like just the characterization of all those different types of people, right? Military goons, extremist economy. Yeah, all those extremist economists, out there who are, real radical about, monetary theories. And
extremists, yeah, all the tendentious language.
Well, and what upsets me about this criticism too, and why I paused the video is just like, what you're missing here is a religious component. Notice that they're using religious language, but they don't have a single priest on that list. They don't have a single rabbi. Well, maybe they do,
or at least links to explicitly Christian organizations like Focus on the Family or something like that. He could be meaning that as well.
As well as I do, that this guy would pitch a fit about how we're going to become like that show he saw on HBO that one time. And, we're completely ignoring the separation of church and state. If you saw anything like, Society of Jesus on there, that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. They're pretty left wing, or if you saw like Baptist preachers on there or something like that, he would be pitching a fit if there were concrete religious links. You know it as well as I do.
Right, yeah. There's optically, especially to these people, it wouldn't look good if this document had that sort of thing on there. So I'm curious as to what he's about to say with this Christian nationalism point he's going to segue into.
You can't win. You can't win. And again, for those of you who don't know, Victor and I, we both grew up in very religious households, and I think I speak for him, when I say that we both are sympathetic to Christianity, if uncertain about it.
I'm a little more certain than you are, but you do speak for me. We do come from that background. Yes, just in case our viewers need to know that. I want to see what point he makes here, though.
Just rhetoric, but a little bit of digging reveals that the God they pray to is not the God of the Bible, but a mythologized vision of America itself. Much like fascists throughout history have relied on a glorious false past to act as a North Star to guide them into the promised land.
Glorious false past. It's like that meme that's like, no one was ever happy back then. No one owned a house. No one had a job. No one had a family. No one was happy. You know that meme? That was popular a year or two ago. Yeah, so especially when these people seem to make it their academic job to subvert our understanding of what the past was like at every turn. And then they turn around and say they had a fake and fictional past that they allude to. It's like, well, okay, says you that you're the person insisting that it's a fake past that we're trying to return to.
And so too have American fascists wrapped themselves in comforting mythology, proving that what they are doing is not only just, but divinely inspired. When you have a higher power on your side, it's pretty easy to justify horrific acts. Okay, with the brains behind the project out of the way, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What exactly do these people want?
I'm sorry, not to be a obsessively pausing person, but the dig about if you have God on your side, then that can justify all sorts of things. Alternatively, I would also point out, if you use the cudgel and the specter of human equality, saying that we're all fundamentally the same and the fact that any disparity we see must not just be a terrible thing, but a terrible thing that must be blamed on white people, that is also a justification to fuck us over in all sorts of terrible ways. That is the club and cudgel you can use to get away with literally any crime that's used against us. Ryan Falk calls this the oppression narrative for a reason, that literally, no matter how many rights in relation to other races you deny us, whether it's something about affirmative action or being able to have white student unions or being able to have quotas for us or being able to advocate on our own interests, we all get denied those things and nakedly discriminated against. But because of this oppression narrative of slavery, segregation, white privilege, Jim Crow, what am I missing? The Holocaust, all these sorts of things, you can't ever apparently be upset at this sort of mistreatment because of these past sins. We are justified in doing whatever we want to you. You can't complain about it.
Well,
that's the irony.
Ultimately, you can justify and rationalize anything you want for any reason you want. Like, come on now. I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning.
Of course, yes.
What's their end goal? Well, there are 4 main priorities. In their words, they want to 1. Restore the family as the centerpiece.
Oh my fucking God, what a monster. What monsters, Jesus Christ. Imagine building your society on family. Holy Christ, what a terrible, terrible plan.
The centerpiece of American life and protect our children. 2. Dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. 3. Defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. And 4. Secure our God-given individual rights to live freely. What our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. Okay, you can probably already see where some of this is going, but let's start with the boring stuff. The nuts and bolts of manipulating the federal government to serve the right. A lot of this project centers around gutting what's called the administrative state. This is stuff like the EPA, FEMA, HUD, the Fed, stuff like that. The humdrum logistical stuff that nonetheless often plays an important role. Or sometimes not. Looking at you, DHS. There's a lot of this stuff, so much so that it's often called the 4th branch of government, and it deals with the day-to-day operations of the country, everything from transportation to environmental regulations, food and water safety, and so on. Most of these agencies are created when a law is passed that makes people think, there really should be a group of people responsible for making sure food is safe for consumption, or whatever. The government slaps together an elite team of nerds, that is to say, subject matter experts, people who actually know what they're talking about, and there you go, you've got the FDA. The FDA then takes over the task of enforcing whatever regulations they come up with in administrative courts. But this is all really boring. All you need to know is that a lot fewer people die because the FDA exists, and we have fewer polluted rivers and extinct species because the EPA exists. Conservatives don't really like...
Okay, this is painfully one-sided. I understand, or maybe are you an ANCAP, Jim Dewey? Are you sympathetic to ANCAP ideology, anarcho-capitalism?
I mean, it depends what you mean by sympathetic to. Like, in an ideal society, you know, I was a limited government supporter, but I was never like an anarcho-capitalist. I was never on board with like eliminating a lot of these regulatory organizations, but certainly reining them in.
Right, yeah. So like the point I'm making is he's I'm not saying we should like demolish these agencies in general, but the way he's presenting them, subject matter experts, like at this point, if you're not disillusioned with what the term expert means, then you're missing the plot. Like there's a lot you're missing out on. The corruption of these agencies makes a lot of problems, whether it's burdensome regulations from the EPA or it's the FDA being so corrupt on behalf of big pharma. That's where a lot of these problems and bloat comes from. And it's kind of a shame that he doesn't even acknowledge that or acknowledge that side of it.
Well, no, you have to trust the science and you have to trust the experts. And
I do, yes.
Especially when you're the person in power, when your side, or at least people you're sympathetic to, are in power, you really don't want to erode the cathedral too much, so to speak.
Yes.
And in framing it that way as just this benign group of nerds who's just here to keep you safe, as opposed to power-hungry czars who don't actually know what they're doing and creating based off of nothing but their own gut instinct. And I know that's not a charitable interpretation of it, but
he's giving the inverse. Yeah, let's just go. Yeah.
Like rules in general, especially rules that protect the environment or poor people. So these agencies need to go. It's not good enough that the president can appoint the heads of these admin agencies. For example, Trump appointing a fossil fuel executive to head the EPA. No, conservatives want complete power over everyone in these agencies. Because right now, the subject matter experts at, say, the EPA are not beholden to politics. They just come to work and try to figure out how to... snails.
Yeah, I call bullshit on that one.
I'm calling bullshit. Yeah, so benign. So benevolent.
They're not beholden to politics. Come on, guys. And you want to know something? How I can't think of a better way to become a subject matter expert on something like pollution than, in this particular example, spending your entire life working in the oil industry and having to become a subject matter expert to ensure that you and your company are in compliance with, thousands of pages of hard to understand and oftentimes conflicting government regulation. So I really don't like that. They drag him through the mud because, you used to run an oil company. Well, I mean, let's start digging into the ties of the people you guys appoint into those positions, and let's see how politically neutral they really are.
Oh, no, they're just benign experts who show up to work every day. They don't have a dog in the fight. They're just trying to do good. I mean, that is so elementary, or it is so juvenile. He can't dare call himself any sort of expert or intellectual or presenting it in that way. That's shitty. That's just dumb.
Because I, for one, implicitly trust the experts.
Oh, of course. We need to. We have to. God bless them.
Or something. Much of the argument here centers around whether these agencies are constitutional. Conservatives like to claim that since the Constitution didn't explicitly say federal agencies like these were part of their master plan, they're government overreach and should be dismantled. Historically, federal courts have disagreed with this assessment, so until now, we can rest assured that our milk has been pasteurized and our water isn't contaminated with lead. But here's the thing with the whole constitutionality argument. Who cares? Most countries around the world scrap their constitutions entirely when the people decide they're no longer relevant or they need to be overhauled. Only has this weird reverence for the...
Who cares about the Constitution, but we're the fascist ones. You and I, the right wingers, we're the fascists. Fuck rule of law and shit, man. But you guys are the fascists.
Yes, we are.
Constitution for the greater good.
Such a relic. Why are we holding so hard to this? I know there's some irony there. If we're honest, there's some irony in what he's saying. And also, what's interesting, he was saying that the fascist right takes issue with this fourth branch of government of all these agencies not being connected by politics or contaminated by politics. But conceptually, the Supreme Court is kind of supposed to be a branch of government that was just supposed to read the law, right? They're supposed to interpret the law, even though we know nowadays that they are extremely politically oriented. We know the left-wing ones and we know the right-wing one, even though the court wasn't intended to be that way. And we obviously know that has to be the case with these agencies as well.
Well, he completely waves away the idea that we should be concerned about this. He referred to it as the fourth branch of government when our governmental system was set up so that there were delicate checks and balances in place to prevent any one branch of government, any one man or any group of men from becoming too powerful and too tyrannical. But no, we shouldn't be concerned at all about this this group of unelected subject matter
Right.
experts, these czars who are completely outside the realm of checks and balances, who have no check or balance other than the executive who appoints the heads of those organizations.
I don't see a problem with it.
That's exactly what a fascist would be doing, is trying to operate outside of the rule of law. That's exactly, and I really hate sort of finding myself echoing boomers. Oh, the Democrats are the real fascists.
Right.
Real Nazis.
Yes.
But I mean, come on now. That's exactly what it would be. And the irony too is like, I don't know how far deep we are into this video, but presumably around the halfway mark. And he still is
Halfway through.
He still has yet to say anything about exactly what the conservatives are doing that makes them fascist, about what makes this plan so bad.
Yeah, he's been a little slow about that. He's burying the lead, but he'll bring the facts, logic, and reason soon enough. I'm sure he will. Let's get
Finn Wraith is here. Nice to see you, buddy.
Ooh, Finn Wraith.
Been a while.
When people influencing, yes. Let's see. So what he says, or when the people influencing the masses decide these things are not needed anymore. Trying to figure out what he means by that.
Yeah, that was probably like
in response to something.
On context.
Yes. Yeah. My condolences.
So
I'll try to keep an eye on that chat. God dang it, Jim. Let me click it.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah, I clicked and then it paused.
Constitution.
There, I clicked.
Well, which God is your witness?
I said chat is my witness.
Fine.
Prince for the Constitution and the Founding Fathers. Part of that is due to the relatively short history of the country. The US has only really existed for a couple hundred years. When you look around the world and see some of your peer nations have a couple thousand years of history, you might feel the need to mythologize your past just a little bit to make your nation seem special. The Founding Fathers have been elevated to godlike status, especially among conservatives. But the truth is, they were a bunch of frat boys. Okay, not all of them. Ben Franklin was 70 and Washington was 44. But a lot of them, dear viewer, are younger than you are right now. Alexander Hamilton, the one with the annoying fan club, he was 21, and he wasn't even the youngest. Anyway, the point is, when you look at historical events without the rose tint of mythology, you see a bunch of normal people just kind of making it up as they go along. It's normal that things change over the centuries. What's considered constitutional should reflect the values and norms of the time. That little tangent aside, let's get back to the goals of Project 2025.
So if they reflect the norms of the time, that's what he said, the norms of the time, and that apply in a right-wing direction as well, not just this one progressive leftist sort of trajectory that I'm sure he would be okay with.
I didn't want to pause the video because I want to get through this, and we're an hour deep. But since you paused it, there are things that need to be addressed. It's like, not to echo my boy Bronsky here too much, but look, IQ and ability is not necessarily correlated to age. Like, okay, he was 21. Like, cool, he wrote a pretty damn good document, and he was a pretty smart guy. And he wants to talk about, oh, well, you haven't been around too long, so you really have to mythologize your past. Like, number one, citation needed, motherfucker. Number two, we're a lot closer to the reality of what our founding fathers were, because it wasn't that long ago, and there's surviving written documents and accounts of what occurred. Like, if anything, the past of ancient China, who's been around for a few thousand years, or the past of Great Britain would be mythologized a lot more because nobody remembers, and a lot of stuff was lost to time.
Mm-hmm. Or there's more of an appeal to literally magical forces as to how the nation began in the case of China.
It's not even about, the sacrosanct nature of the founding, the founding documents and the, mythos of the American founding. It's about the fact that, okay, we've put this constitution in place. We've all agreed that this is a constitution. This is the rule of law. This is the frame we're going to operate within. We fought a bloody civil war that has told us that you must accept the constitution in toto forever. You cannot leave. And now you're trying to tell me that we are not going to abide by that constitution. We're not going to abide by that governing document. We should change that governing document to reflect the times, or rather to reflect what's politically expedient for you. No. And again, I'm not trying to clutch my pearl. That ship has sailed. The rule of law has sailed.
It has. We are not the Constitution worshipping boomers that we may have once been at some point, right? We don't have that attachment to it anymore. The point is, like, the idea that, oh, this Constitution, after all, is malleable. That's awfully convenient for the shitlibs that want to change our country. What a stroke of luck, right? Good for them that that's the case.
You can't have rule of law and malleable law. They are two incompatible things.
Yes.
We talked about the boring stuff, wanting to gut the administrative state, but what else is in there?
Here we go. This will be it.
It's 920 pages after all. They've got to have some other ideas.
Oh, yeah.
Well, a lot of it is what you might expect. As Trump stated on numerous occasions, they want to kick the cultural Marxists out of the
Why does it keep playing?
Demolish the deep state and combat war.
I'm telling you, man, Mossad is after us. Ringo Hayes says, can you turn his mic up one to match yours? I just want to make sure that our audio is balanced. That's very helpful feedback.
Sure, that's good. Thank you, Ringo Hayes. I turned up the gain. Is there something you can turn up?
Yeah, I had the desktop audio down by 5 decibels, so it should be okay now. Maybe we're blowing out eardrums, but
I had to, yeah. Oh, I do want to point out in our chat, Wraith, well, I think people had to mature at a younger age before than people do now. And I think that's true. I think that is true. People did grow up faster. Whenever my parents tell a story of anything, I get the sense that they grew up faster and earlier than any of us did, based on the sort of things they did. The deficit in testosterone that we have observed over the past 50 years, how that's gone down for men. We're getting more soy and more shitty. Okay, it says I'm louder than Jim right now. We'll turn the gain down a little bit, though, honestly.
On my end, if you just leave your gain where it was, and we should be golden.
Okay.
All right. So that.
But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all that people did mature faster back then. And again, if you're smart, then that might be the overriding factor in what someone's age is. Or for example, was it Fred Hampton? I think it was Fred Hampton. He is a black radical revolutionary intellectual. I think he was associated with the Black Panther Party. He was allegedly, supposedly, taken down by the FBI or COINTELPRO. He was 21 when he died, yet he's considered this super great anti-classist, Leninist, progressive person and this amazing thought leader. And I think his Revolutionary Blackout is a black leftist channel who originally named themselves the Fred Hampton Leftist channel. So this dude who's 21 years old, just like Alexander Hamilton, can also be some amazing thinker, apparently. This just goes to show the whole, didn't you know the founding fathers were actually pretty young, is like a little shitball smokescreen that he throws at you.
Okay, make an argument, because Alexander the Great was like 17 when he started to rise to prominence. So.
Also true.
Continuing on. It's the first time I said it all.
Yeah. Well timed.
Technology at all levels of government. They plan to do this by making extensive use of Schedule F, a piece of legislation established at the federal level by Trump, which allows the president to fire federal government officials at will, presumably for not sufficiently bending the knee. The project calls for an executive branch with essentially unchecked power, making the president basically unaccountable to Congress. They want to dismantle the liberal system to build one more favorable to conservatives. That means scrapping environmental protections, moving away from globalism, punishing corporations for DEI language.
Oh no, how dare we move away from globalism? Oh my God.
These are all good things too, because he says, DEI language. Well, what's diversity? It's diversity and inclusion. It's another term for, affirmative action. That's what it is.
Yes. Or shit lib rubbish. Yeah.
We were just talking about that earlier this stream, where it's like, okay, we've got a very real competency crisis. Our infrastructure is crumbling. We can't maintain anything. And it's largely a function of things like, diversity and inclusion. It's
DEI, or the alternate acronym is didn't earn it. Right? That those positions were not earned, and those are consequences of having this happen.
I'm waiting to hear, almost as we're almost done with this video, I'm waiting to hear about
there's 7 minutes left. Yeah,
about the jackbooted fascism. I'm still waiting to hear about the ghettos that are going to be established, and
they're the brown shirts. They're the brown shirts. I'm waiting for him, man. I'm waiting for him. Surely he has to deliver, because there's no way he could be exaggerating or overstating the threat of evil right-wingers. He would never do something like that. This we know for sure. There's no way he could be doing that.
It's funny, because it sounds like they actually think these corporations genuinely believe their DEI statements. They want to escalate tensions with China by ending economic engagement entirely, crack down on immigration.
Okay, by the fucking way, this is the dumb, cynical corporations are just using woke language to evade scrutiny. There's that Bloomberg article that came out months ago where they actually did follow through with that DEI rubbish. The headline of the article and little graphic they showed found that like 6% of new hires in a bunch of these big companies were white men. The rest were all diverse people. I'll try to find the article I'm talking about. But they followed through. It's not just this cynical, dumb far left take about how they're not going far enough, right? It's just rhetoric. We want to see action. They did the action. They are following through on it.
I'm not sure what Alpha 6 means by this, but he says, I hate to say it because I know what your channel is about and time limits, but there are people out there who have actually read all 900 plus pages of the project 2025, some with less crud opinions. I take it you're referring to us, but like, okay, I'm not going to sit down and read all 900 pages. I mean, this guy is going out of his way to make a video, and he's not the only one. I mean, there's dozens of videos out there kvetching about Project 2025, the new fascist playbook. And if there was language hidden in there in the 900 pages, surely they would have dredged it up to talk about it. If the whole point of the video is the new fascist playbook.
You would tell us. I would hope so. But continuing on.
Crack down on immigration, criminalize LGBT expression. They claim that any talk of gender, gender identity, and so on is pornography and should be banned, and has no First Amendment protections. They want to scrap labor discrimination policies. Quote, maintain a biblically based, social science reinforced definition of family, meaning scrap protections for same-sex marriage, and plan to, quote, secure our God-given individual rights to live freely, unless of course you're one of the aforementioned groups they intend to criminalize out of existence. In that vein, to touch very
this is what I mentioned before. If you disagree with gay marriage, then that makes you a fascist. You're denying them their individual liberty.
And mind you, like the crony capitalists on the right are some of the ones who have benefited from our trade relationship with China to,
right.
Detriment of the United States broadly. But somehow wanting your nation to be independent of a, foreign tyrannical power, one that's diametrically opposed to you, is somehow fascist. Wanting to roll the clock back like 5 years on gay marriage is fascist. Like, were you in a fascist state then? Everything here sounds relatively reasonable. Like, and he didn't go into detail on exactly what was meant by, they're wanting to say any LGBTQIA plus expression is pornography. Well, I mean, something tells me that what they're getting after is probably like actual pornography, and what they're getting at is these men who are taking their clothes off at drag shows in front of children.
Right, yes, the free speech, just stuff that libs of TikTok posts, those sorts of things, right? That sort of thing would be quote unquote criminalized, which whenever it comes to children, and anyone will acknowledge this if they're honest, there are totally different standards as to what they're exposed to, as to the sort of speech that gets presented before them. This was done. Sorry.
Not to cut you off, but I'm understanding what Alpha 6 is saying now. He's saying that douchebag McGee over here has got shit opinions on it, and this is a shit video, and we should look for somebody else who's talking about it.
Oh, okay. Sure. I mean, that's entirely possible. But how many views does this video have? Because part of what matters is how much reach the video has, or how many people have watched it.
And I know that they have, what's the name of this channel again?
Second thought.
I'm sure they're the most viewed video on the subject.
Let's see. 609,000 views. 110,000 views. Came out in November 2023.
Yeah, and I can't find. Okay, so there's one with 1 million views by Leisha Miller. I suppose.
Oh God, I know that person. Yeah, she's awful. I mean, I bet it's an even longer video, right?
Yeah, it's 36 minutes, and it's one of those things where I'm not looking to beat this to death. This guy's got a reasonable amount of reach. I mean, spoiler alert: there's nothing in Project 2025 that's based. As much as I wish it were so, as much as I wish that the Republicans had finally grown some balls and they're actually going to render effective change in 2025 should they come out on top. Like, just remember that Trump had control of all three branches of government for a period of time when he was in office, and nothing got done. No border wall was built. He did give like $500 billion to black people, though. Managed to get
that done. And he gave Israel everything they wanted, and he got the corporate tax cuts done. But apart from that, not a whole lot. Well, and this is something. This is a good maxim to believe, because I remember I was asking Sean Last one time what his opinion on the book, it was the Nicholas Wade book from 2014 that went into hereditarianism and race and IQ, and I asked for his little review on it, and he's like, "Yeah, it's okay. It's kind of mediocre, but it also has some dumb concessions that are in that book, basically." And I was like, really? Because my understanding of this book by Nicholas Wade was that he unmasks himself as this evil, demented racist. And what Sean Last said back is that, yeah, books, or in this case, people that shitlibs don't like, are rarely as based as their critics claim. Like there's always, you have to notch down whatever the rhetoric is that's being ascribed to these people, and like notch it down a couple levels or a couple pegs, because they always overstate or overestimate just how based these people are.
All right,
that's
briefly on their views of pornography. If you read the text, they basically just mean any discussion of gender, abortion, or any identity other than straight and cisgender.
So put the text up.
They want all.
God. Show me the text that you've read. Show me the text.
Maybe he will.
Instances of this kind of language stripped from society. While it's a little
stripped from society. I do not trust that paraphrase. I'm sorry, I do not trust it.
Cliche to compare the conservatives to Nazis. You know what books were the first to be burned? Which institutions were the first to be shuttered?
The Institute for Sex Research, Magnus Hirschfeld.
I am surprised that he admits that.
Well, because it was those were good books, and it was bad that they were burned. But also, it took a really long time for us to tell you that, because if you knew, sympathetic to Little Mustache Man. So that's how it works.
Books on gender and sexuality, and institutions that studied these topics. But okay, we know elected conservatives are like one step removed from outright fascism at this point. But how are they justifying this? Yes, we all know they just forced this stuff through if they could. But at least for now, they still have to play by the rules of Western liberalism. So the key to their plan is to lean on unitary executive theory, which dates back to the devil himself, Ronald Reagan. In a nutshell, this political theory suggests that maybe having three separate but equal branches of government isn't a good idea, and that instead the executive branch should dominate the relationship. Reagan's team came up with this notion to help facilitate deregulation, and it kind of just stuck. Every president since Reagan has made use of this theory to wield just a little bit more power than they probably should have. Bush Jr. justifying his invasion of Iraq, Obama justifying widespread US deployment overseas, Trump's Muslim ban, and so on. Now, the Project 2025 ghouls want to make sure the president has essentially unchecked power, that Congress cannot prevent the president from doing what they want to do, however heinous their pet projects may be. There's a whole conversation about unitary executive theory in government circles. People are writing books about it and having very important conversations with very smart people. And you know what? That's what makes this so scary. The Republicans talk a big game about destroying cultural Marxism or waging war on woke, but that's just bluster. When they start coming up with justifications within the liberal framework, the Democrats will cave like they always do. Every single time we see them play ball with the far right, they cede a little more ground each time. Then you get a president like Biden, who just straight up accelerates the process by speeding up border wall construction, approving a record number of oil drilling permits, and then when he inevitably loses because everyone is upset with him, the Project 2025 people swoop in and the Democrats just go along with it because it's technically legal. Not to do it again, but most fascists throughout history have come into power through technically legal means. And then they change what's legal so you can't get them out again. Well, that's all pretty grim, huh?
I mean, fascism is kind of a novel form of government or a novel ideology. Fascists throughout history, like the three countries I can name off the top of my head that had fascist government for any length of time.
Yes, but remember, fascism is stuff that we don't like. Accurately described as that. I also wanted to add that this unitary executive theory, and I know this isn't the same, but the idea of executive order kind of seems like a representation of this unitary executive theory. Joe Biden, this is Ballotpedia, as of April, right now, 2024, Biden has signed 137 executive orders, 171 presidential memoranda, 580 proclamations, and 118 notices. So, like, the overreach of executive power has been going on for quite a while already. And he mentioned, like, something that Obama did with the military, right? This sort of thing has already been going on. And again, he's the kind of far left person who blames the Democrats for caving in, as if somehow we've been progressively getting to be more of a right-wing society as time has gone on. Have you noticed that's what happened, Jim Dewey?
They're completely detached from reality, and that was the next thing.
Oh my God! Yeah,
Democrats are going to cave like they always do. Really? I can't think of a single time in my life in which they've caved and acquiesced to something on the right. Like
what about in 2017 when GOP tried to get rid of Obamacare? Basically didn't happen, or at least the new healthcare plan got totally cockblocked. The Republicans within the party, like John McCain, it was his famous thumbs down thing he did, basically sealed its fate. But the Democrats didn't give in and let it happen. It's not that is just not what took place.
So it sounds like he's done with this video now too, is he not?
He's got like 3 minutes left. So let's see.
What's the solution here? Do we just vote harder? No. I mean, do that if you want, especially if you think you can make a difference at the local level. But things have gotten worse for us with every single president. And things have certainly gotten worse for people living in the third world as the US gets more and more vicious abroad as our empire declines. The solution is the same as it's always been. Mass movements. Join an organization, unionize your workplace, learn to defend yourself and your community from fascist vigilante violence. Keep yourself safe online. Hear rights, educate yourself.
For the love of God, I wish the Mossad would stop fucking with the button. He is one step away from advocating for literal violence. Like, he's like, so what's the solution? Just vote harder? I mean, that's something you'll see in the glow up.
Yeah, I thought that's liberalism.
Well, I mean, you can vote if you want. It matters at the local level, but you need to join an organization and learn how to defend yourself from those evil neon Yahtzees.
Well, I would like to ask then, how would you... Oh, it totally is. I was listening for it. He made sure to dance around it and not advocate violence, so we can't call him out for it. But I do have to wonder. I wonder what his position on gun control and guns are. How do you defend yourself against evil far-right vigilantes without firearms? I do want to know, like, does he have some really cool knives that he's selling? Or does he have, like, wands from Harry Potter that happen to actually work? Because if he has those, then maybe I can understand why he would be against guns, but also advocate that message.
If I had to, make a prediction as to what his opinion on the subject is guns for me, not for thee, right? So he would probably support, like, oh, the red flag laws need to be enacted. We need guns for self-defense, but, we just can't let crazy people have it. So, like, they can...
Right, yes.
Like you and I to make sure that they have the guns and we don't.
Yes, or I think Ryan in one of his videos about guns, or one of his few videos, declare racism to be a mental illness, which there's already been movements to do that, murmurs about doing that sort of thing. And then they say, oh, we can't let mentally ill people have guns. We need to have common sense gun control. So ergo, anyone we think... that's always the weird part. They never think of that, but they say we need to change the DSM-5 so that gender dysphoria is no longer called a mental illness. Then presto, ContraPoints can have a gun, but you can't. So that's the world he's thinking of.
Self and those around you. Things like Project 2025 don't happen in a vacuum. There is an economic base to these developments. The US is losing ground on the world stage, and will soon be superseded by China as the dominant economic power. Domestically, the average worker is worse off now than in living memory. We can't afford the skyrocketing cost of housing, food, healthcare, utilities. Everything is going up, except wages. We have no mandated paid sick leave or parental. We have no benefits, no labor protection company.
I am so...
Yeah. All of those things are, and granted, I don't want to put words in his mouth. He might be the one person on the left that's against immigration, right? But
I was thinking the same fucking thing.
All those things he just named are a direct result of the labor market here in the United States getting saturated with hordes and hordes and hordes, millions and millions of illegal immigrants who are, taking up all the housing and driving real wages down. Don't try to pin.
They're undocumented. They're undocumented. You evil bastard, Jim. They're undocumented people. Okay.
More and
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you like an asshole. That's exactly right. This is the same dichotomy I mentioned before. Or you could have diversity, or you can have standards, but you can't have both. This is the same thing here. You can have a nice, cool welfare state with all sorts of cool free shit and goodies, or you can have open borders. I think this is what Hans Hermann Hoppe mentioned. Like, you can have a generous welfare state, or you can have a border. You cannot have both. Like, or as you mentioned, there could be the carve out, but I'm skeptical of it. That this dude is against immigration, or he has some kind of restrictionist bent to it. But to me, that's unlikely, unless I'm apologies for cutting you off, though. That was
no, I was just about done anyway.
Okay. I mean, exactly right. I'm glad we were thinking the same thing, though. Like, this dude, for some reason, the shitlib dream, the wet dream, is that you can let in unlimited amounts of people and it will put no pressure on all of the social services. Like, it's hilarious. It really is.
I just don't understand it because you haven't read Marx.
Oh, I haven't. Or I haven't read the economic literature that apparently immigrants, especially even illegal kinds, are just straight up better people than natives. They commit less crime, they contribute more to the economy, and they're not the fault of anything. Right? They don't drive wages down. If you're to believe a lot of the news articles about immigration out there, there's just absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm just not acquainted with that literature.
more and more companies move to the gig model of employment. These are structural problems caused by the very nature of capitalism. Run the simulation 1,000 times and we'll end up right here every single time. The race for endlessly increasing profits results in monopoly, overaccumulation, a falling rate of profit, economic desperation among the masses, and a surge of reaction that carries fascism to the very top. You want a different result? Break the machine that powers these societal evils. If capitalism is allowed to survive, we will not. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this episode was made possible by Henson Shaving.
Okay, we're done.
This is a new one for me, and I'm really glad they reached out.
Yep.
So the way he framed it, he made it seem as though fascism is the inevitable conclusion. That fascism, not socialism, is the solution to this all. Because ultimately, capitalism is just going to get us right back here.
Well, let's see. If fascism's bad, capitalism's bad. So the correct answer must be whatever far left thing or platform he advocates, but probably wouldn't commit to if you asked him. If I were to press him on it, I would say, are you a communist? Are you a Marxist? Are you a Leninist? And he'd probably say, no, stop strawmanning me. You're so unsubtle. You don't have a proper understanding of leftist economic theory. And then I'd say, are you a Keynesian? He'd say, well, no, I'm not that much of a capitalist. I'm a social democrat, or I'm a democratic socialist, or whatever term he finds convenient, but basically alludes to the same thing.
Well,
these people tend to be really hard to pin down.
So I was really and anytime you try to pin them down, they'll just backpedal and be like, oh, you're strawmanning my argument. You're misrepresenting what I'm saying. Well, no, I'm trying to ascertain what it is you're saying, like make an argument here.
Right.
And so I kind of had a feeling this project 2025 was going to be, as much as I hate the term, a nothing burger, because like the Republican Party is not that based. Like nothing based is never going to happen. Nothing ever happens. But I would like to transition. I'd like to transition. Somebody better not clip that out of context.
Jim, what's going on, man? What are you doing?
Well, actually, that's so funny that I phrased it that way, because so I recently became acquainted with a YouTuber who has put our playbook, Victor, the Alt-Right Playbook, down to videos. He's figured out exactly what it is we're doing. He's made a whole video series on it, and how to deprogram us, how to de-radicalize people like you and I. And I almost hesitated to play this on stream, and we are blind reacting to it, right? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that this is going to be so stunning and brave that you and I are going to both transition. You and I are going to change our names, lop off our dicks, and start wearing dresses. So let's take a look. Let's see what he's got to say. I'm ready to be de-radicalized.
I'm ready too. Bring it on.
Fucking ads.
Say, for the sake of argument, you run a modestly successful YouTube channel, and given the current political reality, you're thinking of doing some videos on the alt-right. Let's say you've been trying to understand the alt-right for some time, and would like to do a series that tackles the big question.
Damn it. I clicked on the wrong thing.
Oh, you're ruining everything.
I was trying to see how old the video was. Sorry.
Argument, you run a modestly successful YouTube channel, and given the current political reality, you're thinking of doing some videos on the alt-right. Let's say you've been trying to understand the alt-right for some time, and would like to do a series that tackles the big questions. What are the rhetorical strategies the alt-right uses to legitimize itself and gain power? How do these strategies work? Why do they work? How do we keep from falling for them? And, importantly, how do we catch ourselves when we start using them too? You're thinking of calling this series the Alt-Right Playbook. Setting aside that any lefty who makes a YouTube series with alt-right in the title will see their life go to hell, there are 3 things you'd have to clarify from the get-go.
First, X down on that one.
X to Dow ContraPoints made a video on the alt-right, and he, not she, has a glowing Wikipedia page, has a shit ton of money, and is revered as some sort of ethereal god in the mainstream media. Like, nothing has happened as a result of it. The funny thing is, if you look at the comments too, that it never has this flaming or brigading that is supposedly being alluded to here. But of course, fundamental to every ideology is it has to pose or posit themselves as the central victim. Everything is always conspiring against them. They're always fighting these overcoming odds against them while they're trying to serve, while they're serving as the underdog. Well, so it's standard operating procedure.
I love how he is already trying to portray himself as being hyper noble. Well, we need to recognize these tactics, and we have to stop ourselves from using them. They're too dangerous. We can't. We just can't.
I know.
I cannot, in good conscience, use rhetorical tactics like these.
Well, we're about to get autopsy. No, I'm sorry. We're going to get dissected and vivisected. Can't wait to be studied. Let's do it.
First, what is the alt-right? For clarity's sake, you'd have to tell people that the alt-right is a pack of loosely aligned groups and individuals that have existed for quite a while at the peripheries of American conservatism, but have recently gained footholds in the Republican Party proper. The term alt-right implies more or less what you think it would, positioning themselves as the young, edgy nirvana to the antiquated motley crew of 70s and 80s conservatism. They seek to replace and critique the likes of Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan for being, let's not mince words here, not reactionary enough. The alt-right, the people who adopt the label and those who just...
I'm going to pause it real quick here. So Finn Wraith asked, he says, aren't these videos 5 or 6 years old?
Yeah, this one is October 2017. So it's 6 years old.
This particular one is, but this is a continuing series. So the most recent one I just looked was made 2 months ago. So,
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and they're all very short, or at least the newer ones are. They're like between 2 and 5 minutes long. Some of them are like, Jesus, 41 minutes long. We'd be here till
oh god,
dissecting that one.
We would. It's a long-term process, though. I would say in response to you, Finn Wraith, that yes, people don't call themselves alt-right anymore. It definitely is a dated term. But you'd be surprised at how much the people you call leftist boogeymen or the shitlibs still use that term unironically. You would be surprised at how much it still comes up, especially in mainstream news articles. So, and by the way, yes, it is an old video, but it's still important because these videos themselves are significant that we on the right get off our ass and actually address them head on instead of just ignoring them like the right seems obsessed with doing when it comes to leftist material.
News, and you have to remember that 10 years ago, it was, or 5 years ago, it's 2019. Like, this is still well into the Trump era. And I mean, I guess I'm behind the curve because I'll still refer to myself as being a part of the alt-right, or I'll refer to us broadly as the alt-right.
Yeah.
Really fell for the whole, well, Unite the Right was evil, so we can't be alt-right no more. The alt-right never went away. I'm not even quite certain that it was neutered in the way that a lot of people think it was. After Charlottesville, we've just rebranded, and then we're less prominent in the public eye because we've been forced off platforms that we used to be able to post on. YouTube is, the first and foremost. Like, you used to have all these talking heads on here, or not talking heads, but content creators on the right that were publishing some pretty edgy stuff on YouTube. Alternative Hypothesis, Ryan Falk comes to mind first and foremost. We've just been banished to the shadow realm. It's not dead.
But as a wise man once said, continuing on.
Points has high overlap with white supremacist think tank the National Policy Institute, Stormfront and the Ku Klux Klan, Breitbart News, and various sections of 4chan, 8chan.
Breitbart is not that based, by the way. Let's not fuck around here. You read their articles, they tend to be slavishly devoted to Israel and Zionism. They still are. They still kind of toe the line on certain boomer conservative topics. They, at least for a while, especially during this time, were still loyal to the security state and the warfare state. Like, just stop this canard of Breitbart being alt-right. Like, stop.
Well, and in any case, like, okay, 8chan no longer exists, right? They migrated elsewhere. So they either went to 4chan, they went to Friends.chan, they went to Telegram. Reddit went mostly to 4chan. So, I mean, I get that it might seem a little dated, but it's still relevant. Like, these people didn't die. These people didn't have a change of heart or change of opinion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, and he points up Reddit there. I bet this was before r/the Donald got nuked from orbit by the shit libs. I bet it was before that. So good job, buddy. I bet you got your wish. We purged these evil Nazis from the realm. I sure hope you're happy, right?
Yeah. Sections of the asshole atheist community, anti-feminist YouTube, pickup artists and rape apologists, the not all men, all lives matter,
okay,
and basically anyone who uses the term so.
This is, oh my god, yeah, this is, I'm thinking about high school all of a sudden. This is really is a throwback. That's funny. But rape apologists, yeah, okay. Be more tendentious with your rhetoric there, kid.
Yeah. Is he talking about Sargon's "I wouldn't even rape you" comment? Because he had a different logo up.
He could have. No, that might have been Roosh V. Okay, Roosh V. He's not a pickup artist anymore. I think that's who he was alluding to. Again, rape apologist, that's a bullshit propaganda term. That just needs to be dismissed out of hand for the rhetorical horseshit it is.
Warrior or virtue signaling, unironically. Not everyone in these groups is in the alt-right, but the alt-right traffics at the intersection between them. There's a wide range of differing and frankly incompatible ideas about government and the social order among these groups, but as it gains power, the alt-right is congealing into a somewhat cohesive ideology. And the reason they matter at this moment in history is that of all the people in the 2016 primaries, only one was the alt-right candidate. And while not everyone who voted for him is in the alt-right, they are his base, his most ardent supporters.
This could apply to Bernie Sanders and every communist and tanky that decided to vote for him and support him.
Well, again, they're trying to make it out as though he was the alt-right candidate when he was probably the one whose values most closely did not, or quite frankly, did not closely align with the alt-right. Like, he was the furthest left on this whole field. Like, I remember all these people talking. He was the one who was like, "Oh, I don't care that much about gays or abortions or that sort of thing."
I would counter that people like Richard Spencer, federally propped up or not, he was explicitly supporting Donald Trump in 2016. And when he won, he did the little, the Sieg Heil, hail Trump, and we're going to party like it's 1933. So and Jared Taylor, I believe, supported Trump as well, though Jared Taylor would say that he was a disappointment later during Trump's term. If there's an approximation as to who the candidate is that happens to be the most adjacent to the so-called alt-right, perhaps it was Trump. But then the same could be said for Bernie Sanders. And all the far-left Maoists and tankies on the internet and all those extremists, they all globbed on to Bernie Sanders as their guy. Does it mean that Bernie Sanders himself is some kind of tanky? Well, not exactly in my estimation, but that's the kind of guilt by association horseshit he's doing right here. Anything else to add before I continue?
Continuing on.
And they carried him all the way to the White House. Next, you'd want to clarify why they're called the alt-right. Alt-right is a term coined by National Policy Institute president, avowed white nationalist, and professional speedbag Richard Spencer. The term is meant as
he punched a Nazi. He got punched.
Glorifying violence against your political opponents, but the alt-right, those are the ones who are they're dangerous. They're the fascists.
Oh, they're fascists. That's why it's okay to punch them. Okay? We called them bad. That's why it's okay to kill them.
a euphemism, a way of painting a happy face on racism. And that's not an opinion. One of the stated aims of Spencer's organization is the removal of non-whites from American society. And
especially if they're illegal immigrants. Like, that's the funny thing. Like, these are if they're refugees and they're not from here and causing problems and they're burdening us with expenses, at some point, like the Dalai Lama said, at some point they should be returned to the countries they came from.
Well, and if the people who happen to be causing problems and disregarding the laws of the United States and coming here illegally, holding our laws and our sovereignty in contempt happen to be non-white, well, I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions. That's not on us, you know?
and the purpose of rebranding white supremacy with a term like alt-right is...
Okay, but white supremacy always was a slur. It has a propaganda, uncharitable slur designating people like us. Like, have I ever gone through my life thinking I'm a white supremacist now? I've converted to the Church of White Supremacy. And first of all, Christian identity is like such a small portion of this sphere. I don't think it even exists. But like that's never been a term. White supremacy has never been a term of identity. That's always been a smear term.
No, so mainstream white people are not made to feel like racists when they vote for racist policies. So every time a journalist writes an article about the dapper fashions of the alt-right and doesn't title it Lipstick on a White Supremacist Pig, that journalist is being a coward and treating a hate group with kid gloves basically because the hate group asked them to. So, you might want to clarify why you put that.
Who on earth during this period of time was treating the right with kid gloves? Like, they're not overtly hostile enough. And mind you, like, there's a point in time where the media at least tried to retain some, like, there was this thin veneer of impartial journalism that supposedly still existed. So you're faulting them for not being hostile enough to white supremacists, the white supremacists. And again, to your point, what I was going to say earlier, it's like, nobody identifies as a white supremacist. The closest you'll get is white nationalist. And it's one of those things where it's deliberately being reframed as, a negative ideology, right? This ideology that is anti everybody else but white people because they're bad. Whereas if you actually talk to white nationalists or interact with people in the alt-right, their issue is that they have been radicalized because they've been attacked over and over again, and they're looking to, as they say, secure a future for themselves and their children.
That's it. Yeah.
And when you meet those concerns with overt hostility, whether it's, smear pieces or slander pieces in the media, or, like he showed earlier and, sort of had a good hearty chuckle about it, meeting them with open hostility, well, you're only validating their opinions. You're only encouraging that sort of thing to happen.
And you're very, very properly identifying the issue. Shitlibs like him never, ever examined their own role in causing the spread or the existence of these people in the first place. Like, I could go as far back saying that a lot of us would never get into things like the Buish question, or in things like that rhyme with hereditarianism, or things of that nature. We would have never touched that subject matter if it weren't for the outpouring of anti-white vitriol. If it weren't for the genocidal rhetoric towards us, we would never ever bother with it. But because these people pushed it so far, suddenly people like us are popping out of nowhere. Oh my God, we have to bat this down. This is so terrible. Well, if these people had it.
You have to remember, too, at the point in time that this is occurring, shortly after Trump's election or, during his presidency, like, the Zoomers were still the youngest generation on the internet, and people like you and I who belong to that generation
Yes.
ones who had been subjected to the most propaganda from their very birth. And it takes an awful lot to undo that programming and to get a person to start to question.
Oh my God. So true.
Whether or not this whole equality thing, there's no differences between, different races, or it takes a lot to undo a lot of the propaganda surrounding a certain event that may or may not have occurred during World War II and start to question the world around you and the ruling class. You have to understand that it takes in just this egregious chain of abuses and usurpations on your behalf to create this menace that you're so afraid of. So
exactly right.
And I guess he's unintentionally making the alt-right playbook in highlighting some of these things, like laughing at punching people on the alt-right or punching white nationalists.
Yeah.
This is the playbook. Like, this is why we are who we are.
And I'm very glad you brought that up, because we were not the way we are. We weren't born out of the crib with Jared Taylor or William Luther Pierce as our dad, right? Or our grandfather. We were not raised with such people. And we started out, as far as I can tell, pretty much the same, as standard issue, Israel-loving boomer conservatives. As long as the government's not doing it, you're deep-throating the right of corporations to do whatever they want. Any military intervention, totally fine, right? That's what we were before the whole anti-white enterprise became so manifest, so abusive, and so vitriolic. We had to do something out of self-defense. Something had to give, and we gave. It's no coincidence that a good portion of my journey towards becoming evil happened in 2020. And the whole George Floyd horse shit started happening, when all this outpouring of Robin DiAngelo and examining white fragility and interrogating privilege, and you had rioting hordes destroying cities en masse. When all this was happening, you're expecting us to go, you know what, Jim, we are terrible. We do suck. We should enable this. We should agree with these attacks coming our way. Nobody sensible does that. Now, regrettably, some do, but those people are dead weight as far as population is concerned. You're completely right. They are not accepting their own role in causing us to change. A very long, gradual process of changing our mind on these things. Very, very gradual process.
Euphemism in the title of your videos. And, well, you'd have to explain that while the alt-right is racist, they are not only racist.
Have you seen that video or that photo before of the grandma doing the seat?
I've never seen that before.
Neither have I, and I'm shocked. Chad, do you know the context of that? Because I suspect she was like hailing a taxi cab or something like that. There's no some Schlumer white lady is sitting there going Sieg Heil. I refuse to believe it.
Or she could be a federal agent, or I would also say apart from being an informant, or maybe just like the mocking phrase, "We're coming for your children," right? Remember hearing that last summer, and this revisionism started cropping up about, oh, they've always been saying that as a way to satirize and make fun of the Christian right for being so oversensitive. And like, if you tilt your arm a little too much, these people just pop their fucking brains out.
Right.
So why wouldn't we assign that charity here?
Yeah, don't you dare ask why they want to do the drag shows in front of children and not at like old folks' homes. Don't you dare question that. Yeah, bigot.
Anti-feminist, Islamophobic, xenophobic, homophobic, transphobic, classist, ableist, authoritarian, and fiercely anti-intellectual. So if you just did a find and replace of each instance of alt-right with white supremacist, you'd actually be leaving a lot out. That's not much of a defense for the term alt-right, it just paints a happy face on a bunch of horrible stuff, but it is useful to have a term that refers to the whole cluster, and you don't have the kind of internet pull where if you coined your own.
The thing that I sort of take issue with here too is you can sort of make arguments for a lot of these different things on this list, right? Like racist or ableist, but I don't know any people on the dissident right that are classist, for example. I don't know the dissident right that are anti-intellectual in the sense that he means it. We're anti-intellectuals. We're anti-cathedral.
We're anti-cathedral. We're anti-corrupt intellectuals, obviously politicized intellectuals.
And that was part of what radicalized a lot of us is like, okay, we were being lied to by the intellectuals about a lot of stuff. And it took like people in the alternative media to open our eyes to these sort of things. And when you finally realize that you've been lied to about that, the whole house of cards collapses.
That's exactly right. That's what Sean Last said in one of his videos.
Talking about. So
I'm sorry, to confirm your point, he's like, the reason that people have anger over these subjects is that they have not only been lied to about it, these lies have been used to blame and incriminate us. So unless you lack empathy towards human beings, like this dude probably does, you'd understand the causality going on with that.
You'll just have to promise not to use alt-right as a euphemism. When the alt-right is racist, you will have to call them racist. When the alt-right is homophobic, you'll have to call them homophobic. If you're stuck with their term, don't use it the way they want you to. Third, you'd have to cover how to engage with the alt-right.
Okay, this is what Ryan Falk has pointed out before with the term racist, where very clearly that is just a term that only means something within just context. Like in Scientology, if you call someone a wog or a suppressive, you could say it's technically true that I am in denial of L. Ron Hubbard's teachings, and I am in fact a suppressive towards the power of someone else's thetans. If you reject all that gobbledygook, then that term doesn't mean anything. Same with racist. If you believe all this nonsense about blank slatism, if you reject that, technically you can be classified as a racist. But because religious gobbledygook associated with it is wrong and shouldn't be believed in, then that term should also not be used. The racist itself is a propaganda term. He's literally saying, alt-right, the propaganda term, used to be substituted with his religious propaganda term. That's what he's doing.
Oh, precisely.
Is actually pretty straightforward. Don't. The reasoning there may not be immediately obvious, especially if you, say, once devoted an entire video to the importance of talking to anti-feminist hate mobs. So you'll have to explain. You have since then learned how such debates with the far right often go,
Yeah, you lose.
To conversations with people who have more lived experience than you. If some guy on Twitter shoots his mouth off about how, for instance, only precious snowflakes would care about how many black women are getting roles in Hollywood, maybe you push back on that. Maybe the conversation gets heated. Maybe you debunk his arguments, make your points, and he walks away in a huff. For you, the interaction is over. But for folks on the far right, it often isn't. The far right keeps mental lists of people who represent the things they're mad about.
This is just projection.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think
this is just fucking projection. Dude, like, okay, this is just what people do. How come they didn't believe me when I brought out all the facts? Okay, you can say that about anyone you disagree with. Any member of something you dislike, you can bring the facts to them and they don't accept it on the spot. This is just psychology.
Right, and that's why debates are kind of pointless, other than like, it's my guilty pleasure to watch internet blood sports, right? But like, nobody is going to, you're never going to win an argument with somebody like that.
No. To me, the point of a debate is to point out whether someone is full of shit. Not even necessarily the ideology, but it could be the case. You can poke holes in an ideology, but it's to prove how smart a person is in a lot of ways.
But to continue my thought, it's like I've been in an awful lot of arguments in both in real life and over the interwebs, and I have never walked away seething rage and kept a mental list of all the people that have slighted me. I'm not so angry that I didn't get into art school that I'm going to do something heinous. I don't.
Well, then I would also ask, what is an organization like the ADL or the Southern Poverty Law Center? Isn't that literally just organizations who list people that are bad? Isn't that the whole point? That's exactly what they do.
I didn't even make a connection. That's it.
Oh boy. I'm sorry. Yeah. We seethingly make lists of people we don't like. Oh fuck. Morris Dees is not available in the comments. Jonathan Greenblatt is unavailable in chat. Like, Jesus Christ.
Symbol of the liberal media, the symbol of video game.
Such a badge of honor to make it onto one of those lists someday. That's on my bucket list, to be listed on like the SPLC's website or something like that.
Right. Well, that's kind of how you know you're trending in the correct direction. Same thing with Agenda 2025, where even though we know this, most of the agenda won't get executed, even if Trump is elected. But we know we're trending in the correct direction because it really, really makes them scared. This is the point I made about my professor saying that the right needs to rein in their extremists. It's like, no. You're saying we need to do the work for you by rooting out the people you don't like. Like, sorry, buddy, we're not going to do that. I think doing the thing you're scared of is probably what we should be doing.
Yeah, why would I join in on the Inquisition? You know?
Yes, right. No, that's why we've had such a problem. Is a lot of people on the right, like Rod Dreher, the cancellation of people like Thomas Acord, is basically just ganging up and dogpiling on cancellation campaigns against allies. This is not how you build a winning movement. You don't do the other side's dirty work for you. You don't do, as Aaron McIntyre said, you know the right is captured because when the right purity spirals to the left. It's on a framework that the left would agree with. That's how you know the right in general in mainstream circles is captured. But I need to shut up. We need to finish the video.
Feminism, the symbol of trans activism. FYI, these are usually women and people of color. And these people aren't people to them. They're just icons for a thing.
Well, I mean, that too. I like how he says these people aren't people to them. Let's think for just half a second what a Nazi is considered to be. And I cite this observation from the Stone Choir podcast. They're very good and you should follow them. I say to my audience, our audience, I should say. A Nazi, what is a Nazi? A Nazi is someone who's considered the maximal evil, but also incredibly dumb and stupid. Like when you think of these Aryan nation, Aryan brotherhood, dumb, hick, redneck degenerates, right? So not only are they as evil as they come, they are also as stupid as you can imagine. They are human refuse. They are garbage. You punch a Nazi. They're people you have no trepidation with just laying out in front of you in the street, just putting them right to the concrete, right to the asphalt. That is dehumanizing. That is how you not see a person as a person. Like, again, the projection, as much as I don't really like the term, I think it's overused as a term. This bastard is doing it so rampantly. We have to point it out. We have to call a spade a spade.
No, exactly. Let's see if we can make it through the rest of the video.
And the way
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. I'll shut up.
And the way they express anger about those things is to attack those people. So while you leave the argument and have a lie down, eat a sandwich, feel better, he maybe vents his frustration by hacking the email of whomever represents black women in Hollywood this week. This doesn't happen every time, or even most times, but it happens reliably.
When did that happen ever?
I'm so confused.
What is he referring to? Is he talking about the fappening? Is he talking about Jennifer Lawrence?
That
was unrelated.
Well, that was unrelated. This was it Leslie Fraser? Who is that Ghostbuster black woman that Miley Yiannopoulos got tangled up with? I think that's what got him banned off of Twitter. Supposedly there was an evil racist Leslie Jones, the harassment campaign against her, which you always have to put that in scare quotes because their understanding of what harassment is you criticize them for stuff and occasionally say mean things.
Well,
so
half the things didn't even fucking happen. Like, what's the why am I drawing a blank on the name of that gay guy who said he
Carlos Maza?
No, the guy who said he almost survived a lynching in Chicago.
Oh, Jussie Smollett.
Yeah,
Jussie
Smollett, and he completely made the whole damn thing up. Like, I'm inherently skeptical of any claims of the right doing anything inherently aggressive, because you have to understand that these people are so complacent and compliant that we collectively on the right have found ourselves in this position. Like, I'm press X to doubt, like color me skeptical that they actually finally did something, even if it's something like really wrong.
Yes. Continuing on.
Enough that anytime you try and debate with a reactionary, you are gambling with someone else's safety. The purpose of debating these people is not to change their minds, but to stem the flow of lies and bad rhetoric. The alt-right is always recruiting, always trying to expand its audience.
No, you are recruiting them. You are creating members of the alt-right. Like, people want to remain within the cathedral. largely. Like, it's not comfortable to be a member of the alt-right. You're so ostracized. Like, people have relationships severed with their loved ones. The only thing you're gambling with in terms of safety is my own fucking mental safety whenever I have to engage with one of you retards. It's like, God damn. Like,
No, this is so disgusting. Finn Wraith says, any famous person who's getting criticism can be made to look like they're victims of some kind of harassment campaign. Yeah, and honestly, anytime you hear someone say, I've gotten death threats in my email, I've been harassed, a few things to say to that. One, that's part of being a public figure, is you have people who say mean things to you. And two, anyone can say that. Like, anyone on both sides can point to an endless orgy of mean things that have been said about them, and even death threats. Though this is an interesting clarification I heard from Glenn Greenwald in one of his videos. Whenever people say, I've received death threats, a proper way to interpret that, unless they show an email, which they never do, proper way to interpret that is they've gotten messages saying, I wish you were dead, or the world would be better if you were dead. It's never anything resembling an actionable death threat. When I think of
incredible. Like, it's not like they're.
No, it isn't.
Here's your address. I'm going to be there tonight.
Yeah, it's not like they dox them. Which, ironically, Antifa, those cocksuckers, do the doxing. They doxed. What was his name? Greg Jones. Greg Johnson, the guy.
Stone Toss just got doxed.
Yeah, he got doxed as well. Like, it's those people who do the doxing and endangering of these people. It's not the alt-right doing this.
You don't have to dox people on the alternative left. You don't have to dox anybody left of center because it's safe enough for them to be a public figure using their real identity. They face no repercussions for what they believe because they're the ones who wield all the institutional power and the institutional control. There's no credible threat from the alt-right in any way, shape, or form. In any meaning of the word, there's no credible threat to you.
Yeah.
And there are ways to reach their intended audience without engaging them directly. It's not only safer, it's often more effective to cut out the middleman, speak past them, not to them. If your purpose is to actually change the mind of a reactionary, well, doing that right is tricky, and doing it wrong can have serious consequences. So until you know for sure how to change the mind of a reactionary without fucking somebody else's life up, do not engage. Once you've got those 3 bits cleared up, the rest of your announcement is just...
leave the engagement to the professionals. You have to know how to engage with these dangerous people.
Housekeeping. Because there are a whole lot of topics to discuss, you'll want to keep the videos short and to the point, and you'll have to alternate them with videos in your...
Wait, doesn't he have later in the playlist videos that are just super...
That are super what? You cut out there.
Long, super long, like 41 minutes, you said?
Yes, he does. Is that something you want
to... Well, that's ironic. Not right now, but I just think he's saying you got to keep it short. And then this dude later in the playlist has videos that aren't short.
I want to touch on what Finn Wraith said in the comments too, where he's like, well, they could even make fake accounts and send death threats to themselves. I suspect that I'm a skeptical guy, right? I've always got my tinfoil hat on, and it's a hard thing to prove. It's a difficult thing to prove. And when you voice that concern or voice that opinion, people are always going to accuse you of, not acting in good faith or not questioning it in good faith. But yeah, I suspect that when a public figure wants to talk about death threats they received, they did it to themselves.
Your more usual wheelhouse, or else after a few months of nothing but this, videos would just be 5-minute blocks of sustained screaming. You'll try to release them in batches when the subjects interlock, but you'll also try not to make any promises about your schedule. And you'll have to clarify that anything you say, no matter how insightful or well-researched, is ultimately your opinion, and invite people to expand or push back on your ideas, provided they can do so civilly. And you'll have to be clear that if people are coming to you for solutions, you do not as of now have any. You're not at solutions yet. Maybe you will be by the end of this, but for now, all you know is, if you want to win, you have to understand why you've been losing. And if you want to defeat an enemy, you have to know how your enemy thinks.
He knows how we think.
Yeah, as you refuse to acknowledge how we think, because you can't even, you lack the self-awareness to put yourself in our shoes.
Yeah, even our humanity. Like, we probably aren't even people after all. Who knew that around mid-2020, I stopped becoming a human being? Very slowly. I'm actually just some kind of primate that lost his soul. I'm not actually a human being anymore. So everybody has free license to lay me out. Just give me a nice punch right in the chin if they want. They get to do that. It's their right.
Oh, precisely. I suspect
I'm not a
the
human.
last 20 seconds or so of this are like some sort of ad, some sort of cash grab for him, but I just want to see.
And
Let's see.
all that's left to say is welcome to the Alt-Right Playbook.